The scent of peace around me is chamomile and rain. It lives in the small things, a chipped mug warming my palm, steam wisping into the pale morning, the slow creak of the kitchen chair as I settle into its familiar groove. Outside, the lane smells of turned earth and wet wool. Mrs. Gable's cardigan drying on her line, the damp fold of the hedgerows. Inside, every object is chosen for the way it keeps me safe. The latch that can't be opened from the outside without my key. The heavy curtains that hide our light. The narrow path through the back garden that I walk when I need to breathe without being seen. I call the child Rowan when I talk aloud to the hollow of my belly. Small, private petitions meant for a life not yet born. Rowan is a name I chose in the quiet between heartbeats, a name that sounds like weather and wood and the soft clatter of ash when I sweep the hearth. Sometimes, early in the morning, Rowan wakes me with a small, impatient kick, and I press my hand flat to the curve beneath my sweater and imagine him turning toward the light. He is the logic to every choice I've made. He is why I hide, why I keep my hair short, why I gave away my phone and learned the serial cadence of the village. The milkman at 7, Mr. Edmund whistling past his gate at 9, the way Daisy the baker ties her apron at noon. 3 years ago, my life had different scents. Chamomile was replaced by sandalwood and ozone, the city tang that clung to Adriel like a signature. He smelled of boardroom leather and the cold hiss of elevators, of expensive cologne that never softened, and of smoke when he was angry, because he smoked when he could not breathe. He smelled like a thing I wanted and feared. He smelled like a future I could never keep because of who he was and what my being with him would have meant to him. A scandal, a weakness his family would use. I can still feel the shape of that rejection as if the memory were physical. Not the words, those were sharp and clinical, but the moment after, when his hand left my wrist and there was no returning pressure. The look on his face was not anger, it was calculation, like someone who had confirmed a theory he had dreaded. He said, "I can't," and he folded himself away from me with the same polite cruelty he used on contracts he refused to sign. Later I learned the other pieces, the calls I overheard, the voice on the line that meant vendetta. Arrangements made by men who counted value in leverage. I learned that my pregnancy would have been a ledger entry. I learned to run. Running for visibility is mercifully easier in small places. You are a person the town knows. You become the person who shops at the same market stall, who brings a loaf to Mrs. Gable when her knee misbehaves. You become an ordinary collection of habits that doesn't invite notice until you make yourself noticed, until you do something the village's gossip machinery can't file away as nothing. I learned to be small. I learned to put Rowan's needs before the ache of making a life with the man I had loved, and still, quietly, love, because a child is a responsibility you cannot bargain away to those who would use him as currency. Most mornings are safe. I brew chamomile because it's cheap and calming. I sit by the window where the light is soft and the world looks like a watercolor someone forgot to finish. I plan meals around what I can carry easily, what won't take me into the city where someone might recognize me by the scar on my cheek or the way I tilt my head when I laugh. I sew, I mend. I speak aloud the letters of Rowan's name to keep it somewhere other than inside myself. I chart small victories, how many nights in a row I slept through without flinching at every footstep, how many markets I left before the bus that passes through with its glossy adverts. That day, the market smells different. There is the iron tang of rain against tar, and the faint metallic lift of a crowd that has been touched by a rumor. I can tell by the way the woman at the fish stall talks too loudly that something has unsettled the lane like a storm wind. My basket is light, an onion, a small wedge of cheese, a bit of bread. I am careful to keep my back to the wider road. I am careful not to step where the puddles throw back a stranger's reflection. I tie my scarf a little higher, let the collar of my coat stand against the drizzle. Rowan stirs, a tiny pulse that makes me smile with the absurdity of it. I remember a night in the city when he fluttered against my spine like he does now, but then we had been somewhere bright and impossible, and I had not known the world would turn on me for his existence. Someone calls my name. I look up because I must, because that is the reflex of being known, of being safe when your neighbor knows how you take your tea. It's Mrs. Gable. She has a knitted square slung over her arm, and her hair is a halo of gray. She smiles too brightly, and for a second the corner of my mouth lifts before I notice that she is not smiling with me. She is peering over my shoulder, eyes skittering like a bird spotting a cat. "There's a car," she says in that small village voice you use when you are trying not to be the bearer of bad news. "Black, and it's been down by the church twice. Strange to see a car like that here, don't you think, dear?" She says it as if she wants my opinion on local aesthetics. I answer with a polite hum, but my hands go cold. The small things in my chest fold down into compact shapes I have learned to recognize as panic. Scent reaches me. No, not just scent, a memory thick as resin. Sandalwood, the faint electrical ozone that hums when someone in Adriel's line of work is near, like the hum of a generator just before it throws the lights on. I drop my basket. Tomatoes roll across the cobbles and burst, red as the sudden burn in my throat. Someone swears. A child laughs. Both sounds too loud. I gather what I can, stamp down the smell crawling up from the soles of my shoes, and move. My feet know the shortest way back to the cottage better than my head knows the names of months. I move as if I am rehearsing an old departure. Light hands, no trace left behind, a body folded into the smallest possible space. Rowan pushes an answer, small and urgent, and I press my palm to the swell and whisper, "Not now, not yet." The lane is a blur of rain and color. I see Mr. Edmund at his gate shaking a broom, looking up as I pass. Daisy the baker watches with a pastry in the corner of her mouth. Nobody runs after me. They do not know why one of their own might vanish again. They do not know the calculus that tells me I must disappear for longer than a year or two to keep my child from a name that would make him fodder for men whose appetite is control. I reach the cottage and close the gate behind me with hands that are deceptively steady. I check the lock, 1, 2, the deadbolt that sits like an oath, and my breath fogs the glass of the door. Inside, the kettle hisses, a small constancy I designed because certain rhythms still keep me sane. I pull the curtain across the kitchen window, though I do not expect anyone to be peering through glass in this weather. My key fits the lock the way it always does, and when the deadbolt slides home, I feel, for an instant, the steady simplicity of survival. The scent of chamomile swells in the air like a promise. Rowan kicks. I exhale a laugh that is too sharp to be pleasant. I do not have a working phone, no smartphone with apps and maps and a history that someone could triangulate. I have a pay-as-you-go with minutes and a number no one knows. I have Martha's number memorized anyway. Martha is my midwife, my confidant. She is a blunt woman with kind hands and a scar across one knuckle from stitches she once botched in her kitchen. Her house smells of boiled herbs and the things you use to stitch nights back together when the town thinks you should be sleeping. If there is any person I would call for help, it is her. I do not call her. I am not at crisis point. The panic is a flare, a warning. I breathe, count to 20, and let the steamy musk of chamomile unfurl in my mouth. Then the car arrives. I hear it before I see it. The low, even rumble of an engine meant to swallow noise around it, a presence that the lane was not expecting. Rain makes a curtain on the window pane like a veil. My heart skids in the small, precise way it does when something anticipates you. I move to the door, and I do not peer through the glass, because it has always been forbidden to give a face to the thing that might break you. I fit my ear to the wood. Rain hisses. Tires whisper across the gravel. The engine idles, and then stops. Silence falls like thick fabric. A knock comes after. A knock that is polite because it knows the rules and because the man at the other side of the knock has had a long time to teach himself how to be composed in public. 1, 2, 3. Slow. Even. Each rap is a beat measured against the small, steady music of my life. The knock is not a battering ram, it is a question. Every instinct tells me not to answer. Every instinct is a map of the last 3 years. Still, a part of me, the part that remembers hand presses on cheeks, the part that remembers nights you think you can rebuild with someone who won't be broken by you, leans toward the door as if drawn by a magnet. I press my palm flat against the wood, a cold block between myself and the thing I am afraid of. Rowan turns sharply inside me, and the motion is a physical proof of what I have been carrying. Not just a secret, not just a past, but a life. Theo? The voice that follows the knock is the one that used to bring me badly wrapped presents on winter nights. The one that could make promises in a tone polished by mirrors. It is softer now, threaded through with something else. Surprise, maybe? Or the tiny cave of regret that lives where an alpha stores what he cannot name in front of other men. The rain makes the words ragged at the edges. Theo, it's me. My name tastes strange in my mouth when someone else says it. It is intimate. It is owned. I have not let many people use it because names can be used like ropes to haul you back toward old shapes. He calls me in the same way the town calls me at morning, but there is electricity wrapped around it now, like someone has put a hand to a live wire. I will not open. I will not unseal the doorway to the city that once took everything from me. Adriel, I say, not a question. The name feels like an anchor and a weight. He who rejected me and then vanished as if nothing but a bad weather pattern is here, at my door, knocking by rain and insistence. The absurdity of it is a bitter chew. The knock comes again, this time harder. I hear his breathing through the wood. It is even, practiced. The knowledge that he has learned to be measured when he wants something chills the space between my ribs. Please, he says, not a command. Not yet. The rain eats the final consonant. Open the door. We need to talk. I do not move. I swallow. I am aware of every small detail as if I have been taught to record them for evidence. The way my thumb is flayed from a seam I mended last week, the threadbare patch on my elbow, the cup-shaped ceramic chip that keeps the heat of morning longer. My hands know these small comforts like prayer beads. Rowan kicks and then settles, and my breath catches. The neighbor's window across the way has a faint glow where Mrs. Gable mends. She is watching, because of course she is. The village is a community of stitches and gossip. We all keep an eye on each other's loose threads. I press my fingers to the key in the lock and think of the sanded wood of Adriel's office desk. I think of his hands, large, used to declaring things, and my chest tightens. 3 years of silence has not taken him out of my blood. Who is with you? I ask finally, because questions have a way of building a new boundary. If he has backers, if he brings the kind of men who count loyalty like currency, then this is not a simple return. It cannot be. I will not have my son used as an excuse. His voice lowers. Rain ticks faster on the eaves, like a timer winding down. No one you don't know, he says. There's a pause. It's just me. The irrationality of it makes me laugh, a small, sharp sound. Just like that, my mind supplies 100 reasons why the man standing in the rain outside my door would come alone. Guilt, curiosity, a final attempt at salvage, or calculation. I both want to throw the door wide and run the other way. The village's silence seems to lean in on me from all sides. There's a new scent in the air now, one I haven't had to map for years. Sandalwood, precisely the way it used to sit beneath Adriel's cologne. But now it's rinsed with rain, and something higher, like ozone before a thunderstrike. My muscles go electric. Rowan stirs, and his motion is quick and sharp, as if he has felt the change in the world before I have. Please, Adriel says again. This time there's no rain in the plea, no mannered control. It's like a raw thread being cut. Theo, I need you to hear me. The word need lands like a hand on a sore place. It is not an impressive thing to hear from him. He used to demand, to take, to insist, with the swagger of a man who believed he was owed. Need is vulnerability masquerading as duty. It changes the architecture of my fear in a single syllable. I press my forehead to the wood, feeling for warmth. I think of the nights I waited for him to change his mind, for the times I let myself hope that if I was patient enough, or if his father liked me, he might choose differently. I remember the sound of his laughter in a room full of other men, how it drew them like moths. I remember leaving him on a bench outside a building where his father had stood with a phone to his ear, heard the words, "no leverage, no liability," and made a cold calculus. I remember packing my bag with one hand, and with the other, folding away the letters he sent later, apologizing, blaming the world, promising to make amends he never kept. Why now, I ask? The question is a small weapon. It steadies me. Adriel is quiet so long that I begin to imagine the worst, a team behind him, a shadow at the edge of the lane, the car's engine waiting like a wolf. The rain bangs a steady report. Then he says my name, and there is a break in his voice I have not heard before. Because they moved. He says the words like a confession. He stops. The sentence fractures. I have never known the exact machinery of his life. I know it in impressions. Decisions made at oak tables, lobbed money, alliances written like tapes across his father's firm. To hear him admit movement, to hear him imply action without knowing to what, is to be given a rope I can choose to grasp or let fall. I do not open the door. I am afraid that to do so is to step back into a current that will sweep us both away. But at the sound of his voice, which is damaged and earnest in equal parts, things happen to my body that I cannot order. My knees grow weak. A hot pain blooms low in my belly, something other than fear, something like the beginning of a contraction. I clutch the chair back because this is the only vertical thing near me, and my hand tightens so hard the paint whines. "Rowan," I whisper, and the name steadies me. The child responds with a sudden, bright flutter, and it feels as if whatever question exists at the door is being answered with flesh. Adriel's voice drops lower still. "Can I?" He does not finish the sentence. I am aware of his breath like a presence on the other side of a thin wall. Then, tentatively, I unlock the door. It opens on rain. It opens on him. There is the familiar tilt of his jaw, the set of his mouth that had once told me all the things he would never say aloud. He is taller than I remember, and the suit he wears looks too crisp to have been manufactured in this weather. Water beads on his sleeves like small, obedient jewels. He does not smile. There is another scent now, layered over sandalwood, a faint trace of something chemical, of a padded leather briefcase left in a car. It is the smell of men who arrange other people's lives for profit. I see the tiniest scab on his knuckle where he must have torn it on something, and I remember my own knuckle and the times our hands fit together like the halves of a puzzle. Time has made him harder in the edges. His eyes, when they find mine, are clear and terrible. He looks down, and there is nothing between his gaze and the rounded swell that fills my sweater. For a moment, the world constricts to the line of his stare, and the strange domestic absurdity of an elegant man in a suit looking at a pregnant belly in a cottage kitchen. He takes in the proof of my choices, proof that he is not the only man who could have been a father, and something in him shifts that I cannot name. The air between us hums with incomplete sentences. "You're," he says, and the rest of the sentence is not speech, but a physical recoil. "You're pregnant." Of course I am. It is obvious as marrow. But the way he says it is the same way someone says the name of a dead thing, startled, guilty, afraid. "Yes," I say. My voice is small. It is not a confession. It is an answer. His hands go to his face. Fingers splay across his mouth and linger at the hollow of his cheek like someone trying to hold on to a tremor. He looks, suddenly, like a man who has realized the calculus of his own errors and cannot make them return. He inhales as if he might take the cottage into his lungs. "I didn't know," he says at last, a lie so soft it could be true. In the pause that follows, rain drums like 1,000 tiny fingers on the roof. "Theo, I do not let him finish. The world narrows. Somewhere down the lane someone calls a dog. Mrs. Gable's light has gone out. The kettle surrenders its small hiss and goes quiet. Rowan strikes inside me, a decisive little kick like a punctuation mark. The movement is intimate and violent, and it puts everything into perspective. You left, I say. It is not a question, because I know why I left, and because my leaving was not a flight from him, but a run toward safety. You left before I could tell you." He closes his mouth. He seems to consider asking for the door to be opened further, for permission to cross the threshold. His eyes search mine for something, pity perhaps, or an answer to a longer calculation of consequences. He has always been a man who weighs things, assets, threats, the soft underbelly of alliances, and now he looks as if the ledger counts less than the thing that rolls under my sweater with a life of its own. There is a sharp sound then, the neighbor pulling up a curtain too quickly, the rustle of someone looking for a reason to be involved. The village is a small thing. It cannot hold my history in neat compartments, but it will keep watch nonetheless. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asks finally, stripped of the veneer he uses with associates. It is a simple question, and in its simplicity there is also accusation and a strange plea. My throat tightens. I have rehearsed the answer 1,000 times, what I would say if fate collapsed into the same room as he did, and none of my rehearsed speeches seem big enough. How do you compress 3 years of fear into a neutral sentence? How do you explain that the reason you shield someone from a man is not to punish him, but to save him from the ways his world would have harmed your child? I tried to, I say finally. I left because of them, because of what they planned, because your father. I see the way his face shudder at the name, the way a muscle twitches in a jaw that learned to hold grudges with a sculptor's precision. He does not interrupt. He watches the syllables in my mouth, like someone watching an experiment, like a man who has spent his life making sure outcomes fit his maps. "You heard something," he says, and his voice is flat now, the flatness of someone who knows facts, but not feelings. Someone said something you couldn't ignore. You disappeared. I disappeared to keep him safe, I say, to keep us safe. I couldn't risk, my words are brittle, I couldn't risk being a bargaining chip. The sound of the village is funny, bright in the space between us. Somehow, it seems a miracle that the world continues its small rituals when the axis of my life has tilted. Adriel's hand is in his pocket. He looks as if he might be preparing to pull something out, a card, a badge, an explanation. There is hunger in the set of his shoulders, but it's not just the hunger of a man who wants something. It's the hunger of someone who has come back to find a life that he might have had, and found that it has grown without him. "Let me in," he says. The words are not a demand. They are a plea dressed in the manners of entitlement. I stand and I consider the threshold between safety and the world I left. I consider Rowan's heartbeat, the tiny flutters beneath my hand, the way the child has become the syllable that reshapes every decision. I think of Martha and the way she would pull her shawl tighter if I told her Adriel had come to my door. I think of all the ways men like Adriel have the power to make choices for others, and of all the ways I have learned to refuse. Not yet, I say. It is a refusal that is not a rejection of him alone, but of the past that wants to reroot itself into my home. He closes his eyes and exhales, a sound that might be a laugh or a sob. Behind him, the black car waits like an untamed thing. He does not reach for the handle.
He stands in the rain and looks smaller than I ever thought a man of his presence could look. "One night," he says, and now he sounds like a promise and a threat both. "One night, and then you can tell me where I went wrong. Let me speak. Let me—" "I won't make my child an experiment," I say. "Not to fix you, not to test your conscience." He is quiet long enough that my bones tense. Then, in a move that is both humiliating and entirely human, he bows his head. "Then let me do what others won't," he says, after, softer. "Let me look after you. Let me keep you safe." The promise is too big for the space between us, too easy a bridge for someone with his resources. It smells of power, sandalwood rubbed across an open wound. My mouth goes dry. I have spent 3 years resisting the idea that anyone could do for me what I have done for myself. I've learned to stitch a life with the edges of small choices. "How do I know you mean it?" I ask. It is a child's question, and the only one that matters. Adriel looks like a man who has been asked to prove the weight of his remorse on the scale of a human heart. He takes a step closer. There is no mannered command in it. It is an approach tinged with the announcement of surrender. He rests his hand, very briefly, against my belly through the thin fabric of my sweater. The contact is a small, electric thing that does not demand anything it cannot give back. Rowan kicks, hard, insistent, and both of us startle at the same time. The motion is small enough to be dismissed, large enough to break the space between us. "I can try," Adriel says.
That is the point where the cottage holds its breath, because everything that happens next will hinge on what kind of try he can be. I have rehearsed offers before, apologies sent like parcels and never received, but this is not about presence or the neatness of his signature. This is about a child whose life is nascent and fragile. The rain has slowed to a steady sheet. The kettle clicks off on its own in the kitchen. In the silence that follows, a sound as ordinary as a clock marks the moment as historic or trivial, depending on what we choose next. I open the door a sliver. The threshold between our lives yawns like a promise and like danger both. He looks in at me, and then at the curve under my sweater, and his face becomes unreadable. "One night," I say. "You can come in for one night, no more." He nods as if I have given him a command. Relief flickers over his features, and then something like hunger returns. He steps in, just far enough to be under my roof, and then he stops, as if there is an etiquette to entering a life. For a few long seconds, we both stand in the kitchen listening to the rain. I watch him watch the kettle that has gone silent, the chipped mug on the counter, the parade of small utensils that make a life. He looks stripped of uniform in a way he never was before. The suit is damp and clings to him like a second skin. He folds his hands in front of him. He looks defenseless, which makes me want to do the impossible thing and wrap a blanket around him like a child. "Before you ask," I say, because the administrator and me must get the rules, "you cannot tell anyone. No calls, you leave the car where it is. You sit, you listen. If you breathe wrong, you leave." He smiles then, and it is the strangest thing. I don't know if it is relief or triumph, but it is edged with humility. "Fair," he says. Rowan stirs, and the motion is a quiet reminder that another life is watching how we choose to bend. The decision rests like a stone in my palm. I do not know whether I am trading one kind of danger for another, or whether for the first time in years I am letting someone else hold part of the burden. I will weigh his actions in the days to come. I will test the seams. I will not forgive easily. For tonight, I unlock the deadbolt. The rain seems to understand that thresholds are being crossed.
Adriel crosses it as if he is entering a different civilization, and for the first time since he left, he seems to be seeing me as I am now, not as a liability to be removed, but as a person with a child living under his ribs. The cottage is small, and there is not much room for ceremony. He takes off his coat and drapes it over a chair with the kind of feral care someone who grew up with servants learns to deliver without thinking. His face tightens with a strange ache when he notices the way the curtains are patched. He moves to the hearth and kindles a flame with a match, as if it is something he has been practicing in secret.
He is competent in domestic ways that people like him do not advertise. When he bends, briefly and almost reverently, to put a kettle on the stove, the domesticity of it strikes me like a foreign language. He is learning to be small in the ways I have had to be for years. A faint, rusty piece of tenderness sits in the move, and for a second I remember how his fingers used to map the hollows of my shoulders with the gentleness of someone trying not to bruise. "Chamomile?" he asks, and the single word is an offering and perhaps an olive branch. I nod. He moves like someone trying to understand instructions. He is awkward and precise and terribly sincere. The kettle begins to hum. Rowan kicks, insistent and then surprisingly large, and both of us laugh with a shortness born of shock and something like relief. The night gathers around us with all its ordinary noises. Outside, rain treads lightly over leaves. In the cottage, a kettle sings, and a man who once left is trying to make tea. The smallest of intimacies, he hands me the mug, our fingers brush, sends a current through my body that leaves me dizzy and alive. There is a way the world compresses when danger is near. Small movements, the recalibration of priorities, the steady translation of fear into ritual. For now, I let him sit. For now, I let him be in the periphery of my life. For now, I remember that Rowan's well-being is the center of everything I do. We are a fragile truce at the edge of a storm. The night is not over. The past is not folded away. But in the hush of kettle steam and rain, there is a possibility that the man at my door has come back not to take, but to repair. My hands shake when I set my mug down. Rowan rolls against my palm as if to say, "Watch carefully. Choose wisely." Someone moves outside, an engine perhaps, settling back into life, or a footfall that is not ours. The cottage listens. My breath is loud in my ears. My phone, snug in the drawer, buzzes once with a notification I refuse to acknowledge. The window fogs with the warmth of our breath. Adriel watches me watch him, and there is a line of apology in his profile that has no public display, only private traction. Then the pain starts, tight, as if someone has wrapped a band around me and is turning the screw. It is the kind of ache that announces itself with the clarity of intent. I grab the edge of the sink. Adriel's head snaps up. For a moment, the careful ease that had softened him dissolves into something raw and present. "Are you all right?" he asks, and there is no protocol in the question, only concern that breaks his hands into motion. He moves toward me before I can answer, and the space between us compresses into something that will decide more than a single night. The kettle forgets to sing. Rowan shifts, and in that movement I am reminded that whatever we become will be measured by the small body pressing against the inside of me. I could close the door. I could send him away. I could wrap myself in the stubbornness that kept us alive for 3 years. But the pain doubles, an honest, bright bell of it, and I find myself reaching for the only hand nearby. Adriel's palm is warm. His fingers find the curve of my hip with an ease that seems practiced by memory. He does not command. He does not attempt to own. He simply steadies me, and that steadiness is dangerous because it feels like a thing I want to rely on. We stand like this in the center of the kitchen, two flawed people, and the life that folds us into choices neither of us can fully conjure.
The rain keeps time. The kettle goes silent. Rowan kicks again, as if to remind us both that he is there, that he is watching, that his small body will be the judge of any promises made in the hush of a rain-damp evening. The pain comes in a line, a clean slash that makes me gasp and see stars behind my lids. Adriel's hand is immediate, warm, sure, against the curve of my hip, fingers splaying in a way that steadies more than it takes. I lean into him because I have nothing else that will hold me upright right then. "You're shaking," he says, voice thin with something like panic threaded through it. It's not his usual composed register. It is human and raw. The sound of it makes something small and dangerous in my chest unclench. "It's a contraction," I manage. My voice is small. Faith in my own lungs is something I have to practice. Rowan bangs at me from the inside as if to remind us both of his tenacious existence, and the movement is as sharp and immediate as a light snapped on in a dark room. Adriel moves fast, in the way people who live with resources can, direct and efficient without being brusque. He reaches for the kettle, turns down the stove, knocks the chill from my fingers with the gentlest pressure, and then he is at the drawer where I keep the little band of peppermint tablets Martha told me would stop nausea. He murmurs, "Breathe," like it's a command and a promise. I do. I breathe. Rowan eases after a few long seconds. The ache recedes from a white-hot pinprick to a dull, warning throb. I feel the aftershocks in my calf muscles and the way my shoulders hold a new weight. I realize I have been clinging to the sink with both hands, nails white. "Tell me when it hurts like that again," he says, and it is the plainest, most ordinary sentence, the sort of instruction a nurse or a lover might give. It is also, impossibly, a kind of surrender, admission that he cares enough to be told. I think of all the nights I taught myself to arrange breath and fear into patterns that made sense. I think of the way Martha used to say, "Small things give you big maps." And I recognize the domestic scaffolding Adriel builds in 3 quick movements. Tepid chamomile with a slice of lemon, a hot water bottle wrapped in a tea towel, the cushion plumped where I can rest my back. He does not ask whether, only does. When the first wave of real steadiness returns, I lie back against the chair and watch him watch me. The kitchen feels like a tiny theater where our old acts are being improvised into something new. He is watching me with a concentration that makes me unbearably vulnerable. "You should call Martha," I say finally. The suggestion has the bitterness of surrender because it means admitting I cannot manage alone. It means letting another person know that there is now a clue on the map that might lead to us. He nods. "I'll do it," he says. But his thumb hesitates on the pay-as-you-go in the drawer because he wants to ask me first, which is the first permission I've allowed him in years. "No, Marcus," I add quickly, thinking of the aides and the armored cars that are too loud for a village lane. "No alarms. Quiet. Just Martha." He looks almost relieved by the line I draw. "Quiet," he agrees. He steps back into the rain-scented air of the doorway to make the call where the sound won't carry into the loafing rooms of the lane. I watch the tilt of his jaw, the shadow of his grief, and I notice, absurdly, the small scab at his knuckle again. Memory is a shoddy archivist. Tiny details set off reels you thought you'd burned. He speaks softly into the phone in terms that lace duty with discretion. "Martha, it's Adriel Halverson. Theo's at the cottage. He had a contraction. Will you come? Quietly. No engines. Lock the gate when you arrive." Hearing his name in his mouth, the way he pairs it with my safety, obliges a strange warmth. Halverson, my word for him in the years after, turns the name into a promise in a single breath. Martha arrives much as she always does, a steady, folding figure smelling of boiled herbs and vinegar, hands knotted like rope and eyes like small, competent coals. She carries a small bag of practical things and a hot shawl. She greets us without spectacle, and the village remembers. There is a woman in a doorway touching someone's forehead, the sort of domestic heroism that is unremarkable enough to pass by unremarked. "You're early," I murmur, even though she is never late. I didn't call. You don't have to, she says, with a kind of fierce affection. She moves closer and looks at my face like a surgeon and a friend. You look like you've been through a storm. She takes my pulse with a grip that has the tenderness of a midwife and the efficiency of a mechanic. Rowan's fine, she says, matter-of-factly after a long minute. You're fine enough for now, but you should rest. You overheard a storm. You look like someone who has been keeping his weather in a jar. I laugh, or make a sound that tries to be laughter. Adriel, standing by the counter, watches Martha and then turns to me with a question without words. I meet it with the confession that has sat like a weight on the edge of my tongue since the night the car pulled away from my life 3 years ago.
If you want me to go back with you to the city, I say, and the carrots of panic pull at my voice, I'm not going to. Not unless I know what happened, what your family did, what Silverstone did. Not unless I can be sure that Rowan won't be used. The words tumble out in a stack of sharp stones. Martha's fingers don't leave my wrist. Adriel's face, he is a man who can smooth out markets and people, folds in on itself. He asks very quietly, "Tell me." So I tell him. It is a sequence of fragments, documented in my memory like scenes from a crime I couldn't stop because denial was a poorer option than knowing. The night in his apartment when the phone lit on his father's desk. The way Adriel's father spoke in a voice that made deals sound like expert strokes. The phrase that lodged in me like a splinter, liability, and the way it was followed by a plan to remove complications. I tell how I had lingered in the doorway of his office to return a pair of gloves, and had heard 2 names I had no business knowing joined in schematic malice, Halverson Investments and Silverstone Logistics. I tell about the call where a voice I recognized as belonging to Alistair Silverstone discussed making an example if distractions threatened their holdings. I tell about leverage, about using a scandal to force compliance. How, in that one copper taste of a call, I heard my life being counted as currency. I bring out the small things I kept, almost talismans of paranoia. A business card slipped into the book I never could finish, Alistair Silverstone, Operations, a number that had been left in a coat pocket. A note tacked to my door the day I left that read simply, "It will be better if you disappear." I show Adriel the faint bruise on a corner of the paper, the impression the staple made, tiny evidence of a machinery I could not fight then. Adriel listens like a man cataloging damage. At first, I see the rational gears engage, the part of him that always solves problems to control outcomes. Then the control slips out of his hands like water. He takes in the evidence in silence. The clean edges of his composure crack. "I should have known," he says at last, and the words are splintered by guilt. "I should have." He presses a hand to his face until his fingers whiten. "My father used to speak about stability and reputation like they were things you could stitch into a ledger. He falters, and then names the man I dread more than anyone, Magnus. He made a bargain with Silverstone years ago. They trade favors like currency. He does not say the rest. He does not have to. There is no defending the choice of someone who leaves when leaving is an option that spares other people. He left for reasons that first felt like a shield, but now, when the details sit on the table, feel like sharp stones rolled toward my feet. "I'm sorry," he says finally, the words so small that they almost disappear in the steam of the kitchen. "I am sorry I left you. I am sorry I wasn't there to stop them. I am sorry that they used our life as something to balance." The apology isn't a panacea. It is an ache. It is also the first thing in 3 years that resembles accountability rather than an explanation. Martha listens to the tidiness of our grief for a few minutes. Then she sets down her bag and becomes, immediately, the woman of action. "Enough talk," she says briskly, in the way that midwives do that cuts the narrative into shorter beats. "We check your blood pressure, we see if the contractions are Braxton Hicks or starting labor.
We get you watered, and you let Adriel call one person, a quiet doctor in the city. He can set up a discreet check without drawing the sort of attention you're afraid of. I shake my head when he reaches for his phone again. No one else, I say. No men with logos, no security. He nods. Marcus will be my call. He'll be the one who keeps things quiet. He'll come alone to move things later. I won't let them parade you into anything. Marcus? I echo. A part of me reels at the idea of an aide entering our cottage like some minor god. Marcus, as far as I remember, is a man who wears suits the way some men wear armor. He has a logistic mind. He organizes. The thought of him in my kitchen with my curtains patched and Mrs. Gable's line outside feels obscene. Marcus will follow orders, Adriel says, and there is a thin steel under his breath that does not reassure me but calms the village in me. He knows to stay off the lane until we say otherwise. Martha gives a curt nod, like she approves of the compromise. She puts a hand over both of ours in a gesture that is not symbolic. It is practical solidarity. We will go slow, she says. We will test them. You will not be a piece on a board, Theo. You will be a parent with the right to decide. Quieter, she leans in and says something that feels like a benediction. You did what you had to. We will do the rest. After she leaves, staying only long enough to write a doctor's name and careful script and to leave a sack of herbal compresses for the nights, Adriel and I are left with the hum of the cottage and the soft echo of our confessions. We do not sleep well. We trade small, brittle statements, not apologies but admissions. He admits that he knew of discomfort in the office, that his father had spoken of the variable being me. He does not excuse the choice to abandon. Instead, he explains the world he lived in, the pressure, the silent votes of men who wrote other people's fate into quarterly margins. I made a calculation, he admits in the blackout of the small hours when we both have drunk too much chamomile and the rain has a steady, conciliatory rhythm. I thought the damage would be temporary if I stepped away. I thought, stupidly, that it would protect you from being burned with my name. It was cowardly. I see that now.
The night passes with this strange trade. One man confessing complicity, the other weighing the admission against the safety he has carved. In the early morning, the sky is a thin wash. Rowan stirs against my palm like some small declaration. Adriel is up first, quietly making the tea again as if this were now an entrance to ritual. He moves with a domesticity that is new and makes me watch him as if he were a foreign film in which I am suddenly translating dialogue that matters. He hands me a mug with both hands and whispers, "Rowan will have a father who remembers." It is not a promise I can hold him to yet, but it lands like a pebble that will start a wave. We stay in the cottage another day. The decision to leave is not a sudden flight. It is a series of small permissions and refusals. I pack a bag with what feels necessary. The things a child will need first. Soft socks, a knitted beanie I could not throw away because it smelled of home, a last pair of Adriel's gloves I had kept because they fit my hand like a memory. Adriel packs with him the compulsive efficiency of a man ordering the world. Documents wrapped in a leather folder, a small first aid kit, a list of names he will call, and a map he has memorized of places to avoid. Mrs. Gable appears on the lane with a parcel no one mentioned. She has always been a constellation in the village. She brings apple cake and a blanket she knitted with a color I told her I liked in passing 3 winters ago. Her eyes are watery when she sets the blanket between us. "For Rowan," she says simply, "you two need strong things." The gesture is so ordinary and human that my throat tightens. I accept the blanket with a hand that shakes and tell her thank you. She presses my hand with both of hers, as if transmitting a talisman of small-town courage. While we pack, Adriel keeps touching the belly, a light, worth-noting contact that is careful and greedy with the same breath. He asks permission before every touch now and says, "May I?" as if politeness is the new faith. The baby responds with elbows and kicks as if establishing himself as a little diplomat in the room. When it is time to leave, the choice of where to go becomes hot as traffic. I do not want the city.
I do not want the bright finished surfaces where problems are filed with the same precision that men like Magnus and Alistair style people. But I also do not want the cottage to be a gilded trap. The compromise is a safe house Adriel's company keeps for board members' inefficiencies. A discreet dwelling with no logos, quiet staff, and a legal team on an as-needed basis. I won't force you into the public, Adriel says at last when my resistance is obvious and justified. We'll go somewhere neutral. No press, no show. I will not parade you as proof of my virtue. Will I see your father? I ask, because naming him is necessary to know whether his influence will orbit us. No, Adriel says flatly. You won't meet him unless you want to.
He stops, like he has hit a wall with his mouth. He will be kept away. I will not let him near you. I promise you that. Promises from him are like tightrope acts, beautiful when upheld, dangerous when broken. But he says it in a manner that suggests he has already put conditions into motion. He dials Marcus while I fold tiny garments into a canvas bag. Marcus picks up after one ring. Marcus, Adriel says with the clipped voice of a man issuing orders into a place that understands them. Secure a route. No sirens. Quiet team. Medical, discreet. We move at noon. 4 eyes on lane. No press, no father. There is silence on the other end, and then a voice I have never heard but have always imagined in the periphery. Sharp, competent. Understood. 2 cars. Driver will be unmarked. No uniforms. I'll leave instructions with the farmer down the road. Everyone will have their orders. Adriel breathes out something like a release. He looks at me and the look is not triumph. It is something quieter. Scale rearranged. They will be there in an hour, he says. They will help you get to the safe house. The hour crawls in domestic work. We clean, we pack, we fold the tiny hat into the bag as if ritual will stitch us together. Adriel peels an old label off a jar and uses the sticky residue to seal a makeshift envelope. The small, useless nobility of doing chores grounds us. We eat eggs he cooks with more butter than my thrifty mind would approve, and the act of sharing a cramped meal with a man who once left me feels like the first breath after the longest dive. Before we go, I pull open the drawer where I keep the small things I could not bear to throw away. There is the business card from Silverstone, the note from the doorstep, and beneath them, a small, battered MP3 player. I had tucked it into the glove compartment of the cheap car I used for my escape 3 years ago. Because if you are going to keep evidence, you keep it stupidly, carelessly. The tape is a fragment, the recording of a call I pressed record on with shaking hands. 2 voices, a laugh from a man who thought cruelty could be architecture, a plan to position me as a distraction. I had kept it as a bitter memento. Do you want me to hear it? I ask. Because part of me wants to see the man who can make markets bend to flinch at the words he thought he had never spoken aloud. Adriel takes the device with fingers that tremble in a way I have never seen before. He sits near the window, and the rain has become a polite murmur now, as if the world have leaned back and will listen. He pushes the button, and the recorded voices come, an authoritative, oily timbre that mentions variable, control, contingency, and a name, Silverstone. The words are surgical in their cruelty. When the recording ends, Adriel's eyes are wet, and the polished parts of him have been roughed by something quiet. I didn't know, he says again, though the device proves otherwise. I didn't know my father had. He stops and sets the player down like someone laying down an accusation. Magnus works in a different moral economy than I assumed. I thought distance meant discretion. It didn't. He looks at me with a look that is a mixture of rage, directed at his father, and shame. The shame is the thing that might change the equation. He tells me that he will make calls, private calls, checks to lawyers who will not publish anything, moves to ensure no paper trail. He promises again, and this time there is an outline of practical steps, blocking orders, a quiet medical appointment, a safe route planned. He says the name Marcus like a prayer,
and tells me that Marcus will be briefed to only do what we allow. I knew about leverage in the abstract, he admits in a whisper that the kettle overhears, but I didn't know they'd use you in the calculus of men who only care about scales. I am sorry, Theo. I'm not asking for sorry, I say, because I've spent 3 years making my decisions into actions while men apologized quietly in rooms too far away. I'm asking for safety, for us to be safe. He meets the demand with action. He reaches to the fold of his coat and takes out an envelope with a travel itinerary he has already printed for 3 contingencies. He slides them across the table like a man sliding armor onto a rack. Names of couriers, times, safe houses. He isn't asking for my permission. He's offering the tools he thinks will keep us alive. The offer is both a balm and a threat. I take the itinerary and read with clinical interest. Each exit is small and non-committal, like smoke signals sent in a pattern designed to confuse anyone watching. No public exits, I stipulate. No press, no legal announcements. We stay off social media. We wear plain coats. We are just 2 people and a baby heading to a quiet house. He agrees. He even, absurdly, seems to relish the blandness of the plan. Plain coats, he repeats, as if he is tasting normalcy for the first time in a long time. At noon, we step into an unmarked car. The driver is precise. He closes the door with a soft click and drives with an eye to routes that go through smaller towns. Marcus is not visible. He has chosen to manage logistics from an adjacent vehicle, as promised. The black car that once sat like an omen in my lane is not in sight. It is a small mercy that makes my chest unclench slightly. The drive is a slow strip of landscape that tastes of damp earth and the soft green that follows rain. Rowan kicks as if to keep time with the passing hedgerows. Adriel keeps stealing glances at me, small, furtive, grateful. He opens his mouth as if to apologize, and then closes it again. I realize I am the only one in the car who has rehearsed silence as armor. He is learning it now like a child learning to be quiet in church. We arrive at the safe house at dusk.
It is anonymous in a way that makes my bones relax. A 2-story place with neutral paint, curtains drawn, a small garden. The staff who meet us are discreet, efficient, trained to treat us as nothing but 2 people in need of rest. They move with a competence that has no show. Marcus debriefs them quietly. Adriel signs his name with a hand that is steadier than mine. Mrs. Gable's blanket is folded in a drawer near the bed, the smell of home hidden in the linen. For the first night in a long time, I sleep more than a few hours. The bed is too large and too clinical in some ways, but it is a shelter. Adriel sleeps sitting up in a chair by the window initially, then, with the permission of fatigue, he lies down on the edge of the bed in a manner that is boat-like, near enough to feel the other's tide, far enough to respect the boundaries we still must keep. We talk in small, confessional lines in the dark. He tells me more of the walls from which he had fled. Magnus, the father, with a grip on the company and a way of making men into currency. Alistair Silverstone, who moves through gray areas between legitimate business and muscle for hire, with a laugh like a closing door. He admits to a handful of moments he cannot take back. Compromised meetings where he let silence be his strategy, polite distance that translated to abandonment. It is never the kind of absolution that fixes everything. It is a work order. He says he will right what was wrong, account for what his father did, shut down Silverstone's sway where he can, press his own resources into channels that will make it costly to touch us. He does not say that everything will be fine. He says that he will be visible in the ways that matter, security, lawyers, financial leverage, without making us a spectacle. Then he reaches out and takes both my hands in his. I will be messy and late, he says, and I will be a disappointment sometimes, but I will be there to be disappointed in. I laugh, then, a sound that is thin but honest. That is a low bar, I say. He smiles like a man who has found a better standard to meet. Then I will raise the bar. The days that follow are a new sort of choreography.
Marcus moves like a shadow outside the perimeter, arranging discreet security with staff who pay attention to plate numbers and personal details with the obsession of someone cataloging evidence. Medical checks come in with hushed voices and small syringes. Documents are filed with names redacted. Adriel's team is thorough without fanfare. We have arguments in the safe house, short, fierce, necessary arguments that hone the edges of our fragile truce. He wants me to be more visible because he thinks visibility will protect. I resist because visibility in his world has always meant data points and headlines. We match each other with reasons and retorts. The fights are more intimate than I expected. In the space between words, Rowan kicks and softens both of us.
There are also small, astonishing precisions of domesticity. Adriel learning to fold a onesie with the awkward concentration of someone who once folded legal briefs for a living. He practices lacing shoes that will fit a child 5 months away. He asks me questions like, "Do you want him named after anything?" And I say, "Rowan," a soft, single word that, somehow, is a vow. He nods as if I have said a prayer. "Rowan," he repeats. It suits him. Wood and wind, a stubborn little sapling. When the world feels close and heavy, we retreat into quiet rooms and do the small healing things that matter. Adriel cooks eggs because he had watched my method and wanted to try it his way. He trims the blanket Mrs. Gable made with trembling hands. We practice changing a small simulated baby doll as if it is a drill. The intimacy is not that of sex or of romance as it had once been. It is the practical, patient intimacy of caretakers learning to be not just lovers, but guardians. The external pressure does not relent. An anonymous letter arrives at the safe house with a thin, brittle threat. Some things are too useful to lose. It is a line that suggests both money and muscle. Marcus burns it under a coffee cup and scowls. He tells us that Silverstone is watching in the way predators watch. Interest and testing. It is a tangible proof that the threat has not evaporated because we crossed into a neutral residence. Adriel does not attempt to erase the presence of danger. He sits with me in the small kitchen and explains, with a clarity I appreciate, what our next steps are. We can pursue legal channels, he says, but they take time. Silverstone has more than time. We can hire more protection, get witnesses to say what they know, we can make sure the men who came after you feel the cost. But first, we keep you and Rowan safe. Then we go after them. I listen like a jury weighing evidence. He has a plan. I have the experience of surviving. We combine them like two halves of a compass. "Will you go to your father?" I ask one night when the rain draws curtains onto the sky again. He is quieter at that. "I will have to," he admits. Not to ask for anything, to tell him what's happening, to put him on notice. He may have allies who will try to pressure me to protect his own interests. I will have to choose, the company or the people in it. That choice is the hinge we both wait for. In the days when a man in a suit can unmake your life with a single phone call, the offering of a son changes the ledger. He knows the stakes. He knows the cost to him. And yet, he does not flinch. "I choose you," he says finally, and it is both declaration and strategy. I choose this life. We begin to push the danger back in measured steps. Marcus and a private counsel draft a letter threatening legal action should Silverstone attempt any overt move. It is the sort of paper that makes men like Alistair answer in predictable ways. When the day comes to leave permanently from the safe house, to shift to a life more visible but protected, Adriel has a plan that is a mix of logistics and apology. He brings Marcus to the front door and has a private conversation with him. Marcus takes a small leather-bound notebook and nods like a soldier given orders. On the morning we leave, I fold the blanket Mrs. Gable made and place it over the small bag like a talisman. I slip my hand into Adriel as we head to the car. The contact is electric but steady. He squeezes back, not possessive but anchoring. "Will you come with me when it's time?" I ask in the car, because the most practical question always has an emotional undertow. "Every time," he replies, and his eyes are set like maps to a future that requires careful walking. We pass through the lane one last time with a thin, orchestrated invisibility. The driver carries us into a world that ravenous men thought would be enough to chew up small lives. But now we have accumulated an arsenal of quiet littleness. Legal threats, steady aids, community ties, and a man whose conscience is finally loud enough to have consequences. We will face Alistair. We will face Magnus. We will do it together. As the car slides away from the safe house and the weather closes behind us, I feel the shape of Rowan under my sweater and the pressure of Adriel's hand over mine. He has not become a saint in the space between leaving and returning. He is messy, he is late sometimes, he says things wrong, but he is present in the simple arithmetic that matters. A man who vowed to be absent now arranges forces to keep us whole. When the black car from earlier pulls up at the edge of the private airfield, it seems like a loop closing. We load into it, with Marcus making sure the luggage is minimal and the faces in the windows blanks. Adriel keeps the small leather folder with the documents nearest to him like a talisman he cannot yet make sacred. He slides his free hand around my shoulder once, a touch like insurance. At the plane, a small ritual gives the whole thing a solemn edge. Adriel lifts my hand to his mouth and presses a brief, precise kiss to my knuckles. Whatever comes after, he says, we will be together on the other side of it. Rowan kicks then, a strong, insistent punctuation that makes us both laugh quietly and a little wildly in the sterile hush. All the plans we make are brittle in some ways. They are also the only thing that will keep this child from being used as leverage by men who have always treated lives like numbers. We take off into a sky that smells faintly of jet fuel and ozone, the same tang that once clung to Adriel like the city. He looks out the small window at the shrinking outline of the town, the cottage, the lane, Mrs. Gable's fence, and for a long moment he is silent. I can see a line of things he is repenting for drawn on his face like a map of priorities rearranged. Absence marked down, apologies tallied, plans for restitution being drafted in the air between us. Whatever happens, I say, and the words feel large in the cabin's small hush, Rowan will not be a bargaining chip. Adriel meets my eyes, and in them is the small, terrible, beautiful thing of a man accepting consequence. He won't be, he says. I will make sure he won't be. The plane hums, a steady, indifferent sound that is at once comfort and distance. The world below, small, green, rainy, pulls away like a memory unspooling slowly. In my palm, the movement within me is a tiny insistence, proof of a life that will force us both to be better than our pasts. He rejected me once. He left. He thought leaving would be protection or convenience or a necessary cruelty. Now he returns, hands full of apologies and plans and awkward domestic competence. He stands at my side as we move toward a future that is not untroubled, but is, for the first time in a long while, shared. The secret baby we carried in private becomes a reason to make change public enough to be meaningful and quiet enough to be safe. Rowan is the line that rewrites the ledger. He is not a plot device. He is a person who will be loved fiercely and protected fiercely, and his tiny kicks are the metronome to which we will set our lives. When we land, there will be more to undo, more to fight. Alistair will not vanish with a letter. Magnus will have men who are practiced. But we will meet them with a different equipping. A father who finally chooses his child, a mother who will not be silenced, a community that has already wrapped its hands around us in small gestures, and a man who understands the cost of absence. We walk from the jet hand in hand into a future that smells of ozone and possibility. The danger is not gone. It will, like a shadow, follow at the edges of our days. But the shape of our center has changed. It is no longer him against me or me against him. It is us, awkward and fragile and resolute, with a child who will not be census or calculation, but personhood. He rejected me. He came back. I am pregnant with his secret baby, Rowan, and together we are trying, stumbling, arguing, making bad jokes at 3 in the morning,
signing forms, knitting tiny hats, to be the kind of guardians we prayed, each in our own lonely way, could exist. The path ahead is unpaved and edged with danger, but for the first time in a long time, I do not feel like I am walking it alone.